Test.
Un grand, s'il vous plaît. Ah, test.
Test, test.
Bla 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 bla.
Good morning. Sorry for my delay, but today I am not very well, but okay, we go. Sorry. Okay, welcome. Welcome to all participants and to our speakers. We have with us the colleague, the commissioner, the commissioner Jan Lenarčič, EU Commissioner for Crisis Management, Ms. Gada Wali, Executive Director for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Ms. Laura Guercio. Eccola. Good morning. Secretary General of the Universities Network for Children in Armed Conflict, and Mr. Mauro Pocar, President of the Universities Network for Children in Armed Conflict. And welcome to all distinguished guests, and my colleague, the co-chair of the Intergroup on Children's Rights, Milan Bergs, and the Vice Chair, Caterina, my colleague. So, as co-chair of the first intergroup on the right of the child, it is a real honor for me to open the work of this high-level conference co-organized with the University Network for Children in Armed Conflict. Indeed, in 2014, as soon as I was elected to the European Parliament, I was one of the co-chair of the co-founders of the Intergroup, which is a sort of informal subcommittee made up of MEPs from different political areas who share the goal of guiding European policies and legislation from a child-friendly perspective. And now, as never before, in such an unstable global context characterized by multiple cases and significant geopolitical challenges, the protection on children, in particular those involved in armed conflicts, must be an international priority. Too many children in the world are direct or indirect victims of the war. Children killed, maimed, raped, kidnapped, enlisted as soldiers. Let me remind you all that these grave human rights violations. A UNICEF report published in June 2022 quantified more than 266,000 serious violations of children between 2005 and 2020 in more than 30 conflicts. These are shocking data. Let us think about the Ukrainian and Israeli children and the children in Gaza, but also the too many children victims of forgotten wars in Syria, Yemen, Myanmar, many places across Africa. Too much, really too much. Government, international organizations, NGOs, and civil society must coordinate and step up their effort to put in place stronger program and action against this global scourge. Much has been done, but there is still much more to be done. At the European level, as Commissioner Lenarčič will certainly illustrate, the attention to this scourge is certainly high. Indeed, in March 2021, the EU strategy on the right of the child, the EU's comprehensive policy framework to ensure the protection of the right of all children and access to basic services, especially for vulnerable children, was published. This strategy brought together in a single, coherent and comprehensive framework all existing EU legislative, political and funding instruments and a new proposal to ensure that children and their best interests are at the heart of all EU policies, not only in their internal but also in the external dimension. Indeed, the sixth macro area of strategy is dedicated to the global dimension, an EU that supports, protects and empowers children globally, including during crises and conflicts. In this context, the Intergroup continued to monitor to ensure that the statement of principle were followed by concrete action. For example, through the question to the European Commission on sexual violence perpetrated on children as a weapon of war in conflict zone, of which I was the first signatory. As co-chair of the Intergroup, I am therefore particularly proud to see that the many seeds launched, thanks also to the work of the Intergroup, are beginning to bear fruit. Indeed, the objective of this high-level conference is to highlight the importance of a global and multi-level effort to strengthen the protection of those particularly vulnerable children, direct and indirect victims of armed conflict. That can be achieved by identifying common guiding principles to protect and prevent the violation of children's rights and to raise awareness of institutions and civil society for the promotion and increasingly active participation of young people. In this regard, representative of the first International Academy Network for the Protection of Children in Armed Conflict, that includes more than 40 universities and various educational institutions, with the support of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, launched in November 2020, the report prepared in 2023, titled The European Guidelines and International Humanitarian Law, Implementing the EU Guidelines and Promoting Compliance with International Humanitarian Law in Relation to Children in Armed Conflict. We will also hear from some of the network students and young researchers, some of whom come from areas affected by armed conflict, to emphasize the importance of their role and effective integration into the decision-making process and the public debate for the establishment of peace and security. As Intergroup, we attached a huge amount of importance to child participation, and I'm particularly glad that we will hear today from young people themselves. This is also in full compliance with the principle enriched in Article 24 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, according to which nothing that is decided for children should be decided without their direct involvement. To conclude, I would like to recall the words of Pope Francis. Children are a sign of hope, a sign of life, but also a diagnostic sign to understand the state of health of a family, of a society, of the whole world. Well, if we will look at the case of children involved in armed conflict, we see how dramatically sick the world today is. Here is the meaning of being here today. Each of us, whether the rule its place in government, international organization, the European Union, NGOs, has a duty to build on the recommendation that will emerge from our meeting. In this way, we can ensure that concrete action can be taken to put an end to the suffering of those children who are, without a doubt, the most vulnerable individuals. Ours is our moral obligation as well as political responsibility. So, many thanks to all participants, and we start our meeting with the colleague Milan Berglitz. I give you the floor. please.
Thank you. Many thanks also from my side to our distinguished guests, dear Commissioner Lenarčič and Ms. Gada Vali, Executive Director of the UNODC, as well as warm welcome to all participants here in the room and all those who follow us online. The humanitarian history has been marked by wars and conflicts, and whether we like it or not, countries will experience conflict in the future. With several crises looming over, wars raging in the Middle East and in Europe, today, more than ever, we need a coordinated response to the global challenges. Children are trapped in situations of insecurity, putting them at the heightened risk to be victims of violence and exploitation, or worse, being recruited by terrorist groups, non-state actors, and other armed groups. During conflicts and during all crises, children are paying the highest toll, and their life will be completely shattered and never the same for the years to come. The impact of grave violations of child rights is long-lasting and affects future generations. The protection of children affected by armed conflicts, hence, starts with prevention. Strengthening essential social services and governance structures in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, operationalizing the humanitarian development peace nexus, and strengthening respect for international human rights and humanitarian law. The human rights violations that occur during conflicts have a huge strain on children and make them extremely more vulnerable to severe forms of abuse and violence. Many of those kids have known nothing else but war. Children should go to schools, not to war. Children should never pay the consequences of the choices of adults, for which they did not take part of. The protection of children and prevention of grave violations, the safeguarding of their rights, and the reintegration of children associated with armed groups and armed forces are crucial to break the cycle of violence that is ravaging some of the most fragile regions in the world, including the Sahel, the Great Lakes region, and the Middle East. As such, the children and armed conflict and child protection agendas need to be fully mainstreamed in the EU's approach to conflict and crisis, working with a focus on prevention and addressing the whole conflict cycle in which children can be agents for peace. The EU has a unique toolbox in terms of crisis management, as we will hear from Commissioner Lenarčič himself. Addressing CAAC and child protection through these tools will not only contribute to the agenda's implementation, but also increase the long-term impact and sustainability of the EU's actions. Many are the challenges connected to children involved in armed conflicts. Reintegration of children from post-conflict areas plays a crucial role. Children released or separated from armed groups and armed forces have particular needs, and immediate and long-term age and gender-appropriate support should be offered to children to be reintegrated into society, prioritizing community-based approaches. Transitional justice processes should also include child protection considerations. As we speak today about children and armed conflict, my thoughts also go out to the thousands of children in Gaza that have been killed, or those who have lost their entire families and find themselves completely alone in a world that is in shambles for them, with nowhere safe to go. I find it particularly disheartening that during this war we had to coin a new acronym, WNSFs, which stand for Wounded Child Not Surviving Family. I really want to stress that behind those numbers of causality, there is a real face of human tragedy. Now, without any political consideration about where to stand in this conflict, I believe that we cannot exonerate ourselves from acknowledging that there is a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. As you said,
yes, now
Ukraine, we cannot stay silent before the killings of children and indiscriminate attacks to civilians and civilian targets. According to World Food Programme, UNICEF, and World Health Organization, the risk of famine in Gaza grows, and more people are exposed to deadly disease outbreaks. UNICEF has highlighted that the conflict has also damaged or destroyed essential water, sanitation and health infrastructure and services, and limited capacity to treat severe malnutrition and infectious disease outbreaks. With Gaza's 335,000 children under 5 years of age especially vulnerable, UNICEF projects that in the next few weeks, child wasting, the most life-threatening form of malnutrition in children, could increase from pre-crisis conditions by nearly 30%, affecting up to 10,000 children. UNICEF executive directors also warned that children in Gaza are at high risk of dying from malnutrition and disease and desperately need medical treatment, clean water, and sanitation services. It is essential that in the EU we scale up the humanitarian response and we work together with all actors to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches all people, especially children, that we find a peaceful solution with a permanent ceasefire, and that all hostages are released. In today's event, I really cannot stress more how important it is to build on the existing EU policy documents, as well as the UN-EU strategic partnership, to be better prepared in the EU to address the humanitarian challenges children face in armed conflicts. In today's event, we will also hear from the Universities Network for Children in Armed Conflict and their latest report with the aim to provide an impetus to update the EU guidelines on children and armed conflict or the corresponding implementation strategy. The EU plays a crucial role mobilizing the full range of EU and member state political and funding tools, including Neighbourhood, Development and International Cooperation Global Europe instrument, to be effective in the different phases of the conflict cycle. Many thanks for the attention and look forward to cooperating more. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Milan. Now I want to give the floor to the Commissioner Jan Lenarčič. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, honorable co-chairs of the Intergroup on Children's Rights, dear Executive Director, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to this important event, because I can say that the issue of children in conflict has never been more urgent. And conflict is the primary driver of humanitarian suffering, and these conflicts are on the rise globally. Today, 450 million children are living in conflict zones. That's more than the entire population of the European Union. We see this tragic reality everywhere across the world, in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Sudan, and the list goes on. From Myanmar to the Sahel, children in conflict zones are being deprived of essential life-saving services. They're being denied of education. They're being made victims of sexual violence. They're being abducted and forcefully recruited into armed groups. And let me make this clear. This is unacceptable. Every child deserves to live and grow up in peace, not to wake up in fear for their lives. In short, to have a childhood. And yes, Mrs. Kinichi, this simple and ambitious mission is at the heart of the EU's humanitarian action. Among the many tools that we use, let me just mention that we have developed a gender age marker, which allows us to provide our humanitarian aid to children based on their specific needs and the specific needs of both girls and boys. And across our operations, we are working to prevent and respond to grave violations against children in armed conflict, and also to ensure comprehensive and successful reintegration into society for children that were associated with armed forces. Last year, in 2023, the European Union dedicated over 140 million euros to child protection activities. This represents over 40% of our total humanitarian aid protection budget. We are also considering life after conflict. And education, in my view, is the best tool a child can have to build himself or herself a better future. And that is why at least 10% of our humanitarian budget is dedicated to education in emergencies. And we continue to advocate not only for humanitarian access to conflict zones, but also for greater respect for international humanitarian law by all conflict participants, because even wars have rules. As part of this commitment, we are supporting the establishment of a network that will issue independent reports on international humanitarian law. And these reports will address, among other issues, also grave violations against children. But we are always looking for ways to improve our support for children in conflict zones. As part of the first ever strategy on the rights of the child, we have committed even more strongly to the protection of children. And we are currently in the process of reviewing of the EU guidelines on children and armed conflict. And I very much look forward to the launch of these revised guidelines this June. And in this context, I very much welcome today's report by the University's Network for Children in Armed Conflict and its set of recommendations on the review of our guidelines. Finally, we must keep in mind that simply delivering humanitarian aid is not enough to solve this challenge. We need to build long-term solutions, and for that we must ensure a holistic approach to our support, strengthening the peace, development, humanitarian nexus. This is the only way to break the cycles of violence, to achieve sustainable peace, and benefit all our societies for generations to come. I wish you success in your discussions today, and I invite you also to attend the upcoming European Humanitarian Forum this March, where we will be hosting a dedicated panel addressing this very subject. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, dear Commissioner, for your words, but overall for your commitment to protect children. It's very, very important for us to have a Commissioner that supports our commitment. So thank you so much. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Valik, that I want to again say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating to this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Honorable members of Parliament, Excellencies.
I'm there. Can you see me?
Yes.
Honorable members of Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to join you today to underline the need to protect children from all forms of violence. I would like to express my appreciation for the European Parliament, and particularly for this intergroup and its mission to protect children across political divides. And actually, listening to all of you, to the previous speakers, the three previous speakers, I think we're all singing the same song and repeating the same messages. And, raising the same red flags, warning against what's happening. And you will find in my speech many of the messages that you have already heard. But I think what we need to do is how to translate all these concerns and all these scary numbers into actions that really go beyond the lip service and do provide protection to children. Parliaments matter, and parliaments have a great role in that. Parliamentarians matter, and they matter a lot. As parliamentarians, you have an essential role in promoting peace, security, and the rule of law. as well as responding to societal concerns and raising awareness. And there's no bigger concern than the concern about protecting our children. You set legislation and legal norms that guide actors on the ground, and you influence the allocation of funds. That is why I was eager to be here with you today, and is why the UN Office on Drugs and Crime was keen to highlight the importance of working closely with parliaments in our corporate strategy. I also want to commend the university's Network for Children in Armed Conflict for co-organizing this event, reminding us of the crucial role of academia and young people in speaking up for children in peril. This event is a valuable opportunity to discuss how the world can do better in safeguarding children in a time of serious global turmoil. Excellencies, today armed conflicts are at their highest since the Second World War. The impact on children is direct and tragic, and we have heard some numbers. It is estimated that more than 460 million children were living in contexts of conflict in 2022. This is in 2022. And the global trajectory suggests that this number is growing. Many of those children are destined to lose their lives too soon. Others are often forced from their homes, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. In the Middle East, where I come from, UNICEF recently declared that Gaza was the most dangerous place in the world to be a child. It is reported that more than 10,000 children have been killed in the conflict so far, while several children remain hostages. In Europe, your home continent, more than 570 children have lost their lives due to the war in Ukraine, as verified by the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. In Africa, Sudan has become the largest child displacement crisis in the world. According to UNICEF again, with a record of 3 million children fleeing since the outbreak of the conflict. And DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, is sadly not far behind, with an estimated 2.8 million children displaced. And there are many other examples. We have heard about examples from Syria, from Yemen, from Myanmar, and elsewhere. As they flee their homes, children become vulnerable to trafficking and to exploitation. Armed and terrorist groups often recruit and exploit children, using some as combatants and others for sexual exploitation and forced marriages. Even when they're not in conflict zones anymore, children on the move become easy targets for human traffickers and may risk their lives in the hands of smugglers. UNODC's most recent global report on trafficking in persons found that they are trafficked. When trafficked, children are almost twice as likely as adults to face extreme levels of violence. Conflicts also undermine the mechanisms that provide children with their rights. And according to UNICEF, children in conflict settings are more than twice as likely to be undernourished and without clean water, twice as likely to die before age 5, and more than 3 times as likely to be out of school. We see this vividly in Afghanistan, for example, where children bear the legacy of decades of conflict, with around 1 in 3 children experiencing crisis levels of hunger, according to Save the Children. Everywhere, heartbreaking stories and images of children affected by conflict have become a mainstay in our news. We must not become desensitized to these images or let their suffering be normalized. The international community needs to urgently protect all children in settings of insecurity by calling for the full application of international humanitarian law, ending the hate that dehumanizes people, and supporting every child affected. And in the long term, we need to work towards societies and institutions capable of ensuring the well-being of children and their rights in all settings and in all places. Excellencies, to ensure the safety and security of children, it is necessary to create a protective environment that places their needs and rights at the center. This means strengthening systems capable of preventing and responding to violence against children, helping and protecting victims, and promoting rehabilitation and reintegration. It means holding every perpetrator of crimes against children accountable. It means investing heavily in prevention, including by empowering children and young people to be agents in their own protection. And it means strengthening caregiving skills and paying attention to children's mental health, including in settings of insecurity. Distinguished participants, in November of 2023, UNODC launched a strategy to end violence against children, together with the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. We have brought some copies for you. The strategy prioritizes children in contexts affected by conflict, terrorism, and organized crime, while also recognizing settings in which violence can be more silent, but no less dangerous. This effort builds on our extensive experience working on protecting children and promoting the rule of law. Since 2015, UNODC's global program to end violence against children has provided assistance to 66 member states, helped produce 33 national policy and guidance documents, and engaged directly with children and communities in different parts of the world. UNODC also reached millions of families in conflict-affected settings with caregiving advice. Furthermore, our office is also supporting many countries to address child trafficking, including trafficking caused by armed conflict, as well as the online distribution of child sexual abuse material. The European Union has been a valuable partner on this journey, with its EU strategy on the rights of the child providing an important benchmark for action. With the engagement of the European Parliament, I see opportunities to expand our cooperation. At UNODC, we have been expanding our cooperation with parliaments, including through stronger partnerships with the IPU, the International Parliamentary Union, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, and the Arab Parliament. Working hand in hand with the European Parliament and other parliaments, as well as with governments and civil society organizations, we can set up efforts to better reach and protect children, especially in settings of conflict and insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, violence is not an event, but a cycle. Our best hope to end that cycle is to protect our children and to empower them to create a more peaceful world than the one we have managed. The world needs peace. Thank you. Our children need peace. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Many thanks, really many thanks, dear Director Executive, Ms. Vali, for your very powerful words. It's very important for us to have to cooperate with you and to work together for our children. Before to prosecute, I'd like to give the welcome to the other guests that we are here in our room. First of all, I want to give the welcome to the colleague Vice President of the European Parliament, Mark Angel, that I give many thanks for to be here. We have here also another Vice President of the Intergroup on Children's Rights, the colleague Antonio Lopez Istuiz, that is another Vice Chair with the MEP Caterina Rinzema. And we have also other guests, other important guests for this meeting. We have, I want to give the welcome in this room to Ms. Diane Smith, the EU Anti-Trafficking Coordinator. But before opening the panel that will be moderated by Emilio Pucci, that is the General Secretary of the Intergroup on Children's Rights, I have the pleasure to give the floor to the Italian Ambassador Andrea Orizio, Permanent Representative of Italy to the Political and the Security Committee. Your Excellency, the floor is yours, please.
Grazie. Thank you very, very much. It's really a great pleasure to be here and to listen to this opening, to see also the wonderful co-members of the panel as well. And special greetings to Fausto Pocher. And really thanks, first of all, to Giovanna Agnelli Landini, to all the organizers for this initiative, which is very timely, unfortunately, very urgent, very important. The protection of children in armed conflicts is a priority for Italy, a topic the Italian government, also me personally, I must say, and juridically and politically and diplomatically are indeed deeply committed to. We marked last year the 25th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and yet through the world we witness an increasing number of crises, conflicts, war scenarios, and situations where children are very often the first victims. And as it was very well recalled, in 22, we have the last figures from there, you said very rightly, 468 million children around the world were living in conflict zones, which means 1 every 6. And more than 23,000 children were victims of grave violations, so an average of 76 violations per day. And that is really a bell. The dramatic trend seems to get worse and worse, and with of course, the ongoing war in Ukraine, the outbreak of the conflict in Gaza, children pay the highest price in terms of abuses, of violence, of violations. And against this backdrop, the EU simply cannot stand aloof. And Italy is ready to make its part to shape a more effective EU action in this field. As co-chairs, together with Belgium, actually, which is now having the presidency of the European Union, we have formed and shaped this Brussels-based group of friends, and we hosted also last month, actually, a technical meeting at our premises, which was not the first one for sure, but which was aiming at encouraging a speedy and ambitious update of the EU 2008, was another word, guidelines on children in armed conflict. So I'm really glad the Commissioner not only stressed the outline, but was mentioning also June as the possible moment when we're really finalizing this. We really need this. It is time for the EU to make full use of our instruments to protect children and devise a fresh new strategy and rights-based approach. Still, there are plenty of important issues that we must focus on. Abuse prevention, as it was rightly mentioned by many of the speakers, accountability for grave violations, fight against forced recruitment and humanitarian access in conflict areas. Things which we see daily in these days. And it is also key to make sure that children are not treated only as passive actors, but rather as independent rights holders, whose voices and points of view should be heard whenever possible. Our future outlook depends on how we invest in it now. The cohesion of our society starts from a more active engagement and inclusion of younger generations in our public debate, as well as in our decision-making systems. I really believe that there is much to be done, then the contribution by parliaments, institutions, civil societies, universities, the network of universities, which was mentioned, is unbelievably doing a good job. And it is indeed crucial when it comes to raise awareness on children protection in conflicts. You are very right. We are saying the same things, but you know, we show the commitment of different institutions. Only together we can make it happen in concrete terms. Multi-level, multidisciplinary action can play a vital role in inspiring you to do more. And therefore, I would like to praise once more the university network, which Italy fully supports, for its committed effort. It is of essential importance. It is using as a pivotal role, which makes really energy coming out of it. I'm very confident that today's discussion and exchange of views will give an added contribution to enhancing the importance of this topic and stimulate ideas on how to translate words into concrete actions. And you can count on us, together with Belgium. We co-chair this group of friends. And I have to say that there is a much growing support by EU member states. Awareness has never been as high as now. Let's use now this unfortunate occasion for everybody to see that we must move concretely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Ambassador. And really again, many thanks for such powerful keynote address to all our speakers. Thank you so much, Mr. Commissioner. Thank you, Ms. Wali, and thank you to the other speakers. And now I give the floor to the second part of this meeting. I give the floor to Emilio for the discussion for the first panel. Thank you again to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and sorry for the patience as well. Thank you a lot for all the panelists before and the keynote addresses and very powerful messages. So now we are going to go and try to go to the nitty-gritty and to open this panel discussion with other esteemed guests here today. I will now give the floor to Ms. Laura Guercio. Is he connected? Perfect, perfect, sure. So we then give the floor. We have with us online Professor Fausto Pocar. Are you with us? Professor Pocar?
Yes, I
Yes.
can. I hear
Please.
you. I hear you. I believe you don't see me.
We
because,
don't.
You don't see me because there is a problem with the video, I understand. But I'm connected with the audio.
Sì, la sentiamo per audio, se vuole cominciare a parlare.
Perfetto, grazie. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the co-chairs of the European Parliament Intergroup on Children's Rights for having convened this meeting and invited to this meeting the network on children in armed conflict. It's a great honor for our network that our activity is given the attention of the European Parliament, and it is for us an encouragement to continue our efforts to cooperate in improving the support to children who are affected by armed conflict. Let me give in a few words what is the next goal. The network was created not to have a new NGO on children's rights, but it is a university coalition of universities from all over the world. We have now around 50 universities with us to fill in a gap in dealing with children's rights in armed conflicts by international institutions. And this idea has been recognized also by the special representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations for Children in Armed Conflicts, Mrs. Virginia Gamba, who has pointed to us that she would need university to study, make research, also with operative goals and proposals, and suggest political institutions and instances to shape their policies on this matter. In this field, which is particularly important because children, as we all know, are the current young generation, but what we do for children will immediately also have an impact on future generations. Now, the first point on which we worked, obviously, is the relationship between human rights law and international humanitarian law. We are based on the assumption, which has been confirmed also by International Court of Justice, that the human rights law does not cease to be applicable where there are armed conflicts, but continues to be applied also during armed conflicts in a way that should be harmonized with international humanitarian law. We were aware that there are guidelines of the European Union on international humanitarian law. These guidelines are general, are important, but do not focus explicitly and specifically on the position of children. So one of the issues we wanted to do is to cooperate to an initiative that was already there when the guidelines were adopted, to have something specifically on children. We were encouraged to do that by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Italy, and who supported us several times in this effort. And we have come to a report on our research activity on these issues that deals with several topics on which my colleagues will be more precise later, but that deal with something that can be done to improve the commitment on children when they are affected by armed conflict, which is not the simple application of international humanitarian law, but is improved also with international humanitarian law, because the current instruments on international humanitarian law, in particular the Geneva Conventions and their protocol, do not deal specifically with children, but refer to them as a vulnerable part of the population that requires special attention, but not necessarily a specific attention when they are affected by conflicts. So this is an important point on which the report deals, and we hope it will be taken up also by the Parliament and discussed in the Parliament in order to perhaps update these guidelines or adopt new guidelines specifically with children in armed conflicts. Let me touch in this connection with a specific point on rights of children in armed conflict. It's not just the conflict.
Professor Pokar, just very quickly, please be mindful of the time. We are a bit behind schedule, so you will have two more minutes. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to refer on something which is current today, because tomorrow we have the International Day of Education. And as university, of course, we put much attention on the education, bearing in mind that the negative impact on children during an armed conflict is not only the armed conflict as such, directly the violence of the armed conflict, but the interruption of education. And interrupting education for children means undermining completely their future. We have now, the UN statistics show, 250 million of children who do not attend schools. To a large extent, this depends on conflicts that are going on. So we dedicated in our study a particular attention on children. I stop here, and my colleagues will certainly be more precise on other issues we are dealing with. And I thank for your attention.
Many thanks, Professor Pokar, and I'm sorry I'm going to be the bad guy here because we are very much behind schedule. So I will now leave the floor to Laura Guercio, who's the Secretary General of the University Network for Children in Armed Conflict, who's been co-hosting this event with us today and has put forward a wonderful report. Laura.
Thanks so much, Emilio. I will be very fast, I do hope. Allow me to join Professor Pokar first in expressing my sincere gratitude to the member of the EU Parliament and co-chairs of the Intergroup on Children's Rights, and also to the keynote speaker for their wonderful speech. And I will go immediately to one of the main recommendations we included in our work. In addition to the recommendations highlighted by Professor Pokar, the network proposes a transformative approach to enhance the protection of children by moving away from treating children as a broad and all-encompassing category of minors. Instead, the network advocates for a review of the EU guidelines that adopts an approach differentiating age categories of children based on their unique protection needs. This approach aims to tailor intervention and support to better address the diverse challenges faced by children within armed conflicts that may vary depending on the different stages of life from birth to adulthood. We have heard about the importance to consider the different sex, boys and girls, but as well as very important to consider the different age phases inside the macro category of children. We know very well that legal instruments consistently define childhood in relation to adulthood with the 1989 Convention on the Rights of the Child, providing the broadest definition, stating that a child is anyone below the age of 18. This clear separation of childhood from adulthood lacks consideration of the diverse developmental phases within childhood. The other-centered view and generalized definition of childhood reflected in international legal languages overlooks the diverse needs of different age groups within this broad category. We know very well that now more than ever a 6-year-old has significantly different needs compared to a 13 or 16-year-old, but in our legal text this difference is not very well defined. Going directly, because otherwise Emilio will kill me, no, going directly to how the network decided to engage in this reflection, we follow 3 tracks. The first track pertains to the difficulty yet critical importance of defining the various age phases within childhood. Indeed, although psychology studies categorize childhood into preschool age, school age, and the puberty to legal adulthood, the definition of childhood is also influenced by diverse societal criteria. And this is very difficult for having a common idea of the diverse age of children inside the macro category of childhood. However, despite the intricate process of defining these diverse age phases, it becomes very imperative to acknowledge age differences in legal considerations among early childhood, middle childhood, and adolescence to adopt tailored approaches addressing distinctive needs and vulnerabilities of children at different stages of development. The second track involves the suggestion to reconsider sociological and legal concepts concerning the diverse age phases on children through an intersectional approach, inspired by Kimberly Crenshaw's theory, introduced in 1989, which perceives an individual's social identity as an intersection of various biological, social, and cultural categories. Despite the widespread use of intersectionality in understanding discrimination among others, there has been a noticeable gap in its application to children. And by applying this approach, the intersectional approach to childhood studies, one might be able to clarify the different stages that mark the development of children from birth to adulthood. So I will go directly to the further reflection track that explore the positive and tangible impacts of this approach. First, recognizing and assessing the diverse demands linked to various age categories not only facilitates the addressing of unique needs, but also serves to prevent further victimization by ensuring that children in each age phase receive specialized attention and reducing the risk of additional harm. This approach holds particular significance in terms of the consequences for data protection and analysis impacting both international legislative and jurisprudential branches, as well as social policies targeting specific age groups and developing more targeted and effective intervention and policies. In the regard of new possible policies, allow me to suggest a proposal on which the network is working, and which regard the establishment of a sovereign national institution that, by applying the above-mentioned principle, could play a very crucial role in promoting, coordinating, and advising in the process of rehabilitation and resocialization of children involved in armed conflict. Because, as we heard previously, what happened after the armed conflict? We needed to re-educate and resocialize children affected by armed conflict. We believe, and I'm going to conclude, that one of the aspects to focus on and on which the network is currently working working is the development of a sovereign national institution which with a hybrid academic and institutional composition. This institution designed not to contrast but to complement existing organization or DDR programs could seek to make a tangible contribution to the effective rehabilitation and resocialization of children affected by armed conflict. As Mrs. Wally underlined, we are an academic entities. So our aim is to give a support and collaboration and to have a collaborative relationship with civil society and the institution to analyze issues, seek solutions, and foster constructive dialogue. In this sense, I would like to also recall the important dialogue that we have with the special representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations for Children Armed Conflict, but also with the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that immediately supported the work of the network. I think that I hope that, Emilio, we could have more spaces in the future to also think about new proposal from the network, like this institution, that we don't have in our international framework. We have a DDR program, but we don't have an international institution for resocialization of children armed conflict. So thank you so much for your attention, and I do hope to also have a very constructive dialogue with the Intergroup and with all the Parliament, if it's possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, and this is just the beginning indeed. And thank you so much as well for your specific tips and suggestions. You are definitely the expert here. Thank you so much as well for putting together such a strong and powerful network here. And as you can see, we will actually use this opportunity to, of course, use the report that you do as a living instrument. And you also have already an open invitation from Commissioner Lenarčič, as you heard yourself before. So now I'd like to give the floor to Vice Chair Katerina Rinzema, who is the Vice Chair of the Intergroup on Children's Rights. Katerina, could you please tell us a bit more what has been done also in your perspective on the Intergroup, especially when you joined, and highlighting some of the challenges the children face in armed conflict, especially in the mission conducted at the border between Poland and Ukraine when the war started?
Yes, thank you, Emilio. Thank you, participants. Good afternoon. Yes, indeed. We went to Poland with the border of Ukraine very shortly after the war had started. Because I think for parliamentarians, it's very important to see the reality on the ground. Often we deal here with legislation, but we don't go to places. And of course, we were a bit scared, but what are our sufferings or our scaredness compared to the people who were actually living there and enduring war? So we went to the border at the reception centers together with members from civil society, from the police, but also we talked with Europol. And already a couple of weeks after the war had broken out, there were huge criminalized networks already coming to this area and trafficking children. So they even already had leaflets warning the mothers, warning the parents of what could happen. And we came back to the European Parliament and there was not a lot of attention for the children. There was not a lot of attention for the trafficking. And therefore, we as an intergroup decided, okay, we need action on that. So I organized two conferences here, especially on the Ukrainian children, with a focus also on the trafficking. Ministers came, media came, but and we endured. But only recently have we seen during the United Nations General Assembly speech, there was more attention for the children in Ukraine. Of course, they are now dealing with the news cycle that every day there's a new conflict. So every day there are new reports, but nothing is very sustainable or durable. And that's just what I think that we need to do here, because as Ms. Wally said, we don't want to play lip service. We want, and perhaps here in the audience, we're already preaching to the converted, but what can we really do action-wise? I was wondering, here in the audience, for instance, who come from areas affected by armed conflict? Some.
People online.
Yeah.
Good. Who has here in the audience has met victims? Well, that's a start. So shouldn't we all decide today also that perhaps we go back to the memory of when we met victims and how we can turn that into action? Because the world really needs their voices as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katarina, Honorable Member Idnema, for your commitment. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to give the floor now to Ms. Paulina Massida, who is the Principal Counsel at the Independent Office of the Public Counsel for Victims at the International Criminal Court. Busy times for you now.
Thank you very much. I'm actually very happy to follow the words of Dr. Rizema, because it's actually part of a message that I would also like to launch. I'm a lawyer. And I work for the International Criminal Court. My task is to represent victims in the proceedings before the court. So I think it really flows very well at the moment in this discussion, because it's important to understand what victims feel, what victims want. And my brief intervention will focus today on accountability, a word which I think is very, very important for survivors and for society, to build the story, to tell the truth, and to have justice for the victims. And my first reflection is in relation also to something which also Dr. Rizema was saying. There was not a lot of attention to children. Now there is more of attention, yes, because we come for centuries in which children were invisible. Children, even in war, are normally assimilated to the civilian population, even in terms of how crimes are drafted and structured in international criminal law. And very recently, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we have seen a reversement of this attitude, an approach in which children are more seen as individuals, as a category of people suffering and living the crimes. And this also leads me to my second reflection. The invisibility of children was probably also given by the fact that for centuries we have thought that children do not have agency. Actually, they have. They are very much interested in what they want and in the way in which they want to contribute to truth, reconciliation, peace, and justice. Now, this victim-centered approach is now much more evident in accountability mechanisms, starting with International Criminal Court. Very recently, the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC has published in December a policy on children in which it acknowledges the important role of children in seeking truth and justice and in being involved and participate in proceedings related to crimes they have suffered from and in reparation proceedings for the prejudice they suffer from that crimes. Now, very interesting, that policy take into account a number of input provided by the University Network for Children in Armed Conflict. Ms. Wercher and myself were highly involved in drafting remarks on that policy, and we are very happy to see that some of the remarks of the network has been taken into account, including the issue of the fact that children are not an homogeneous category and that they have different needs and wishes depending on their life and depending on the situation they are. The other thing that I would like to stress is that it's very important to have standardized procedure, but it's also very important to be attentive to the specific environment in where children are living in armed conflict, because cultural, social, religious belief very much impact their behavior, their feeling, their possibility to develop, and even accountability mechanisms. And I will conclude, mindful of the time, I can go on for hours, I know, but I will I would like to conclude with this new trend in international criminal law, also in relation to how the crimes against and affecting children are perceived. The very last document containing the charges by ICC prosecutor indicates specifically the crime of persecution on the basis of age and gender, which again gives this new trend and this new approach, which I think is essential and should be certainly shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Maceda, and I can absolutely assure you that the members of the Intergroup on Children's Rights don't think of children as invisible, and they've been working very much hands-on and ensuring that children are indeed not invisible in any conflict. Thank you so much for that. Now I'd like to give the floor to Alexandra Sousa Martins, who serves as the coordinator of UNODC Global Program to End Violence Against Children, who has been recently as well working on the joint strategy that UNODC has launched recently. Please, Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Emilio. Honorable members of Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to the co-organizers for the invitation and for the opportunity to shed light on the situations and the suffering of so many children all over the world. UNODC has the mandate to support member states in preventing, in protecting children from crime and violence. And we are focusing on contexts where children are prone to become victims of crime and violence. One of these contexts are precisely contexts of conflict and insecurity. And when it comes to these contexts, there is a group of children that is more vulnerable to become victims of crime. And this group is the one of children who are associated with armed groups, criminal groups, and terrorist groups. These groups recruit and exploit children. They use children in battle, in support roles, and sometimes even to commit crime. If these children are lucky to exit these groups, they are then very likely to be rejected by society because they embody the enemy that society fears. Within UNODC, we have worked with over 60 countries. We have researched the phenomenon of child association with armed groups. We have helped countries to develop legislation, policies. We have trained professionals from various sectors. And we have worked with communities and children themselves. And I think there would be nothing more significant that I could offer today, which would be the voices of children themselves. So with your permission, I would like to read a story that I heard myself, and I quote, "When my district fell to ISIL Daesh, I was shocked by the violence. I remember the military killing my best friend in front of me. I remember dead bodies of neighbors on the street. At that time, one of my friends kept coming to me, and he kept saying, 'Come with me as a volunteer.' He said I could start a better life. Instead of working day in and day out for the car wash, which is so exhausting and paid so little, I could take a comfortable and well-paid job, get a position, some power. I trusted him. And I said to myself, I have nothing more to lose than I have already lost. Later, it turned out that he had also been recruited and sent to convince me. But what really worked was that they knew the situation of our families. We were living in poverty. After everything I saw inside the group, there's nothing I'm proud of. There was no good side to it. It was the darkest time of my life." End quote. So this is the story of a boy we worked with. And this story is similar to many other stories of many other children all over the world. And the reason I'm telling this story is to say what does this story tells us? First, it tells us that we are misunderstanding the motivations of children. There is a lot of concern about ideology and religious fundamentalism as drivers to conflict and to terrorism. But all of the young people we have talked to over the past years, not even one of them told us that they have joined for religious motivations. They earned too little and needed to provide for their family. They lived in occupied territories. They felt forgotten by their governments. They want revenge. And they felt valued and appreciated by the groups. So the instrumentalization of religious narratives is just an additional layer. I believe it would be much easier to see these children as fanatics, because then we would not have to try and understand them. And we all know that if we build our policy responses on the basis of assumption, we are, of course, building houses of cards and they will not hold. If we want to find responses that are minimal and sustainable, we need to actively deconstruct false narratives and engage with reality. So this is my first message. The second message, and I think this comes from the story I just read, is the fact that we need to engage with nuance and complexity. And all too often, these children are presented to us either as being hopeless victims or by being dangerous threats. And I think it can sometimes be very difficult for us to accept that these children are rational, because then we would see them as guilty. And in reality, what our research tells us is that children who join armed groups, criminal, terrorist groups, are actually taking decisions. But they are taking decisions in impossible circumstances. We can't ignore this. So protecting these children is essential, but it's not enough. We know that if we want to support them in their path to reintegration, we need to listen to their voices and take their voices into account, because we know that protection without participation is patronizing. And if we want support through participation, we will be empowering these children. So to conclude, I would like to join the Executive Director of UNODC, Ms. Gadawali, in her call to end the hate that dehumanizes people. Because dehumanization is easier to achieve than we think. And it begins with us and with our democratic debates. With the tendency to vilify the other, because when we see the opponent not as someone who has a different opinion, but as someone who's wrong, not as an advocate of a different perspective or different experiences, but as malicious, as crazy. And this is how we stop seeing adversaries and start seeing enemies. We lose nuance, and we define things as right or wrong, black and white, us versus them. And indeed, this is the polarization that is affecting so many children all over the world in conflict situations. Because we stop seeing children as deserving of protection. They are no longer children, they are the enemy. So my appeal is to let us all not fall into the trap of dehumanization, because our children and we all pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you so much again for telling us the story. And there is indeed a huge stigma associated with children who've been recruited by terrorist groups. So thank you so much for also reminding us that a child is first and foremost as a child, as it is enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And that's very much as well our guiding principle within the Intergroup on Children's Rights. And thank you as well for reminding us that this does not happen in a vacuum, that there are certain conditions that unfortunately bring these children to do this, to make these decisions, and the more has to be done to actually avoid that these children actually fall victims to these crimes. Thank you so much for that, Alessandra. And as you said very well, we should not patronize the children themselves, and in fact give the floors to them. We have here with us today two, in fact, youth representatives of the network. We have Sofia de Bernardinis, and we have Juho Toppari that are here next to Mr. Lopez-Isturiz. And I'll very quickly invite Giovanna to come here to introduce very quickly as well the people who are online. We have Ilian Saudi from Jordan, and Sanar, and Sanar from Iraq, who are also connected online. Thank you so much. Giovanna, can you come? I'll let Giovanna introduce very quickly.
Thank you, Emilio. I'm very pleased to introduce the speakers in this important panel on the participation of young people in identifying measures to protect children in conflict. I would like to thank once again, I will be very brief, I would like to thank once again all the students who are following the conference online today, and are more than 50 students who have taken part in the university's networks activities. Their students come from different countries and continents, some from conflict areas. One of the priorities of the network since its establishment is to support the active role and involvement of young people in our complex societies. On the basis of the great commitment of the entire international community in pursuing common objectives based on the principle of development and sustainability, and considering that our choices today will affect or influence choices of the future generation, we all have a fundamental responsibility towards young people to allow and to put them in condition to contribute to build their future, to strengthen their interest in this active participation, and to empower their awareness to play a vital role in their own development, as well as in that of the communities in which they live, with an approach that enhances and guides the actions undertaken by them in a peaceful and constructive sense. For the network, these aspects are extremely important. The network encourages the active participation of young people in different ways, organizing training courses, involving the trainees in research groups, the like-minded working groups, creating as a common working space for exchange of ideas, experiences, and perspectives, promoting the dissemination and sharing of testimonies, reflection, and proposals made by these students through, for example, the collection of papers to be included in a publication. Just we have a publication on the building competencies and awareness on the international protection of children affected by armed conflict. And with the aim, and this is the publication of the network, with the aim to give importance of the voice to the young people. I would leave the floor to the speakers of this panel and to their testimony of their experience in the activities of the network and in their daily commitment to the affirmation of values universally recognized, values that should be universally recognized not only for the young people, but from all of us, and also underpin the work of the important institution that hosts us today. Before giving the floor to our speakers, I would like to briefly introduce them. Juho Tuppari from Finland, he is studying in Luxembourg, attended the autumn school we organized last October, and he will share his testimony on this training activities experience. Thank you, Juho.
Thank you, Giovanna. Good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking you for this opportunity to participate in today's conference, and I will also try to be as quick as possible because I also want to hear the participants online. My experience of the autumn school, for those who are not familiar with it, it was organized by the University's Network for Children in Armed Conflicts. I believe it was the second edition. Yeah, and this is. I would like to kind of give my own experience. I would describe it in two terms: intensive and international, which are also how it was described. Intensive due to the vast amount of expertise and lectures that we were offered by the network, but from very general overviews of humanitarian law and conflicts and children's rights and international systems, but also very nuanced, like Laura gave here examples of the nuances of the thresholds for children's age. But perhaps more importantly, I would emphasize the second term, the international, because this was a really good opportunity to join students participating from all around the world on these online lectures, which created this, I would say, international setting which would give the students the possibility to practice their global citizenship. And it was really an eye-opener for me, because I believe that in theory, the universal norms of children in armed conflicts will not be strengthened by merely expanding the audience, but by us justifying ourselves to the audience. And I believe that this active learning and actively coming together to, whether it is contestation, to deliberate, but foremost what we did, to come together and discuss. And this is what I believe is very important. Yeah, I would like to also hear the participants. We have some more brilliant speakers, so I will not talk more. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Juho. And now I would like to give the floor to Lilian. Lilian from Jordan. She's a member of a like-minded working group of the network. So Lilian, you can share your experience.
Thank you, Giovanna. Okay,
Hi, Lilian,
first
please.
of all, I want to say that it's an honor for me to be here with all of you. And building on what Juho just said, I would love to share my experience of being part of a research group with the like-minded CAAC working group in the migration topic. It was a very enriching experience, especially that it was with members from different countries and cultures, because that offers a lot of benefits, like fostering creativity and innovation through diverse perspectives and approaches. This multidisciplinary collaboration contributes to a comprehensive understanding of research topics and builds a global network of researchers, opening doors to future partnerships and unique resources. Moreover, cultural sensitivity is promoted, influencing ethical research practices, while exposure to varied backgrounds stimulates creative thinking and problem solving. The global relevance of research is heightened as findings become adaptable to diverse culture and social settings, advancing outcomes. The collaborative environment not only fostered personal and professional growth, nurturing adaptability, intercultural communication skills, and appreciation for diverse perspectives, but also provides access to various funding opportunities, research facilities, and a diverse skill set within the team, leading to more effective project management. Additionally, being part of a network work group emphasizes the importance of the research and gives value to our work, to the work of young researchers, allowing us to build awareness through concrete analytical work and proactiveness. Ultimately, working in such a diverse research group contributes to building bridges across the borders, promoting international cooperation, and creating a dynamic environment that thrives on the exchange of ideas and experiences. Finally, what I would like to say is that this collaboration not only enriches the research process, but also empowers us, young individuals, by validating our voices and perspectives. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Lilian. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Sofia. Sofia from Italy is also a member of one of our like-minded working group. And please, Sofia, just 1 minute.
Yes, I know. Okay, thank you very much, Joanna, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here in front of you. And share my experience as a researcher within the network. I've never thought I would be published at the age of 23 and speaking at the European Parliament now. So this is happening, and so I want to share with you this journey. I firstly joined the first autumn school. This got me interested more in the topic. I gained knowledge, and then I became a member of the group, research group that focuses on the right to education of children affected by armed conflict. One of my contribution was published in the book that Joanna just mentioned, and there I focus on the legal guarantees on children rights to education during armed conflict, from customary law to some regional documents. Being published at a young age marked a personal milestone. And as we speak today, maybe it's more clear that it also underscored the significance of giving space to young researchers to contribute and to support and contribute to the global pool of knowledge. And And this also allowed me to take part to international conferences, like the one held at the University of Luxembourg last year, and to continue also to research and to work on future publication within the network. So I'm really grateful to the network and to my fellow research colleague for the work that we have been carrying out together. No matter the different time zones, approaches, and difficulties that we encountered, we learned how to listen to each other, work together, and collaborate. And I think this was one of the most important things. I think I will conclude here just not to take more time. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's continue to work together for the protection of children affected by armed conflict.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you to you all for your very important contribution to the research activities of the network. And now I give the floor to Sanar Darwish from Iraq, and who coordinate a group of young people who develop an important manifesto. It's a manifesto on promoting youth for establishing peace and security. And it's a part of a project that the network is spreading at international level. And so, Sanar, please, less of 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you, Giovanna, and good afternoon to you all. It's my pleasure to be among you all today. I have the experience with the Network for Children in Armed Conflict since I joined as a student in one of the courses, and then had the chance to contribute as one of the speakers, and worked on different projects. But today I'm going to speak about one of the important projects, is the manifesto, which I have coordinated with a bunch of participants from the Middle East, or like-minded group, students from the Middle East, and network like-minded group on children in armed conflict. And we have set a few questions that we thought these are the mechanisms to implement peace and security, instead of just thinking of solving the problems. In other words, to address the armed conflicts, but let us think in a different way. Let us think of creating peace and security, and then how we can promote these. And that's why we set 6 questions for all these students. And then we came up with different ideas, but I can just give you one sentence of these many ideas, which they were focusing on the work and developing the collective spirit of youth through belief in the concept of teamwork. This can be achieved when young people assume various jobs and positions in the branches of state institutions and mobilize these energies with culture, avoiding conflicts and effectively addressing causes of conflicts. This can be reached through their participation in the decision-making positions to establish peace and security. Unfortunately, there is not enough time to conclude with, but I conclude here with my participation. And thank you all. Thank you, Giovanna.
Of course, thank you, Sanar. Of course, we can share this manifesto, and so then we can have other occasion to present. Thank you, Sanar. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I ask Vice President Marchangelo and Honorable Member Tono Lopez Isturiz to come to the podium to deliver the conclusive remarks? Thank you so much. It's been very brilliant to listen to the young people themselves.
Tell you, it's much more comfortable being there than here.
It's quite dangerous. It's also dangerous a little bit.
Dangerous.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, how not to thank all the speakers that I have spoken previously. You came to listen to them, not to me. And I think that Emilio, they were up to the challenge. Thank you, Caterina, and thank you, Emilio, and everybody who organized this. And in such illustrious presence that we have from the United Nations. So we are happy and thankful for that. And it projects what the work of this working group, of this group of friends, that we are members of parliament, that we have this common cause, that during these 5 years has achieved, I believe, being, an intergroup, we have achieved great things, introducing many amendments in the day-to-day legislation. Thank you also for the team to inspire us, and that has produced many changes in many of the European directives. I think it's also time to reflect also on the personal experiences that many of us we have had. Caterina Rinzema was talking before about the experiences, and I was recalling my visit to many, many refugee camps in these years. And I have to tell you, I was reflecting about an anecdote. It's not an anecdote, it's reality. One thing I saw in certain refugee camps was that when you were approaching children, in some camps they were running away, and in some they came. And it took me some time to realize, and it was explained by experts, that depends on the camp, in the hands of who's the camp, refugee camp. These children escaping from wars are even suffering in these camps. It happened in Lebanon, where unfortunately some of the camps are in the hands of Hezbollah, the control, and it happens many places. So it's not only the war, it's also the consequences. You have spoken lengthily about Ukraine, about Israel and Gaza. These are, as our Italian friend said, unfortunately timely events that are happening as we speak. There are other not forgotten conflicts that are long going on, like in Africa, in Sahel, where thousands and thousands of children are dying every month, also escaping from these wars and trying to come to Europe. There is also in Latin America another, maybe these are not official wars, but the war against drugs is taking a terrible toll also in children, women in Latin America. So these are the things also that we have to add in our thinking and remembering in the work. I don't have to add anything else because, Emilio, we have, I think that everything has been said. I'm also a member of the AFET Committee, Foreign Affairs, and some of us in the Intergroup, we are also in this committee. And fortunately, as we are dedicated to relations outside of the European Union, we have been focused our activities in this, no? And I hope that we have been effective enough that you never are. As a politician, you never are. And there is always much more to do. And I hope that now the elections, European elections, after the elections, we become an official body of the European Parliament, no longer a group of dedicated, effective friends, but for all of you, we need that also to be an effective member of this Parliament. And also that I hope that I will see many colleagues in the next term also fighting for this. Of course, Emilio will take care, as always, and I am very thankful for that. And especially you, many of you, I see familiar faces that you are doing this daily work of conscience also for us, and through Emilio to give us the inputs that we are trying to get through in the parliamentary work. So continue there. because we still have work to do, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tonu. Thank you very much, Honorable Member Lopez Isturiz White. And now, last but not least, I'm sorry it's been a long day. I'd like to give the floor to Vice President Mark Angel. Mark, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Dear Children's Rights Defenders, Excellencies, I'm very honored as the Vice President that I can say you a few concluding words. But first of all, it's a very coincidence that I'm here. I was at the reception at the Italian Embassy in Luxembourg and I met this wonderful woman, Giovanna Agneri Landini, and then we talked and then the name of Emilio popped in my brain and then I said, I do like an old Nokia phone, connecting people. And that's what I did, and I'm very happy this event is taking place. And I must say I'm both dismayed but also heartened to be present at this event. And dismayed because it reminds us that the number of grave violations against children in conflict and the impact of their lives is appalling. We have seen a resurgence of violent conflicts in the past years, including on our continent and very close in our neighborhood. And while wars yields many tragedies, children are paying a particularly steep price. Their innocence stands in stark contrast to the brutality and also the destructiveness of war. And instead of engaging in the wonders of childhood and play, they face death and risk of physical and emotional scars that will mark them for their entire life. And instead of getting an education, they are still too often forced to pick up arms. In Ukraine, we have seen their vulnerability to human trafficking. In Gaza, the number of children killed is quite simply unacceptable. But I'm also heartened by this event because I see the drive and also the will to find every possible lever and opportunity to improve the situation of children and prevent violations and abuses of their rights. We must always remember that behind all the numbers and the figures we read in reports, there are faces of children suffering in too many ways from the armed conflicts around the globe. And indeed, these horrors must serve us as impetus to do more and to become better. And let me therefore thank the Intergroup on Children's Light and specifically my dear colleagues, the co-chairs Caterina Chinichi and Milan Berglas, but also the coordinator Emilio Puccio. And I see there's two vice presidents here, Caterina Rinsema and Antonio Lopez. You're doing a great work and I think the Parliament appreciates your work, and I think after the elections, and I hope we'll all be there again, and I'm sure we will all be there again, you will even be stronger. Because it's only through working together on different levels that we can find and implement meaningful solutions. And that is why it is important that this event has brought together such a diverse set of actors. I love it, meeting academics, meeting students, meeting researchers, meeting representatives from UN bodies. This is so important that we mix, and it gets us a bit out of our Brussels bubbles. The research by the University's Network for Children in Armed Conflict, and especially their report presented and discussed today by Professor Fausto Pocar and Ms. Laura Guerzio, can serve as an important input to the reviewing of the European Union guidelines on children in armed conflict and their implementation. And finally, I'm especially heartened by the participation of students and young researchers, some of whom have experienced armed conflict firsthand. And I'm also advocating for a stronger role of youth in our European democracy. Hearing their research, recommendations and testimonies here today is an important example of engaging the young generation in policy making. I certainly know that the European Parliament will support efforts to strengthen the protection of children. Last year, we adopted a resolution on the situation of children deprived of liberty in the world, in which we dedicated one chapter to children affected by conflict. We welcomed, among other things, the new set of the joint EU-UN priorities for 2022-2027 and the joint commitment to include children affected by armed conflict as cross-cutting priorities, and stressed the importance of advancing the children and armed conflict agenda in the European Union external action and counterterrorism and security policies. And next year, 2025, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of UN Resolution 1325. This is a resolution, Women, Peace and Security. This is a resolution which is very dear to my heart, and I've been working on this subject very long. And let's not forget that there is also a children's right, a girls' dimension, but not only girls, a children's dimension in this resolution. And if I can give you one recommendation, I think our mission is also to increase the participation of children and young people in peace building and in reconciliation. Reconciliation is such an important word. The European Union wouldn't exist without reconciliation between two enemies who had 3 world wars in a row. And I think the young children and young adults are very important in peace building and in reconciliation, because without reconciliation, we will never have peace. This is my personal message to you, and thank you very much. I'm very, very honored that I was invited here, and I will be, if I'm re-elected, very active next year in the Children's Rights Group. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President, and thank you all for the patience as well. Thank you as well for all the people who followed online, and this is, again, just the beginning. Thank you so much.
If you have a little bit of patience, we would like to show you and to share with you a video that the network produced within a project on women, peace and security, national action plans, and children included in national action plans on women, peace and security. And this is a very short video of this project. And yes, the publication will be followed as well.
Unfortunately, I have to go.
We will
have a bilateral meeting.
Okay.
But thank you very much. We'll stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Because this touched me a lot.
Absolutely, because
And
we're
here's my
working
card,
on women, peace and security
will bring us
resolution.
together.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.